Good morning and welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Lisa Nicole Matthews, 114th President of the National Press Club and Assignment Manager for U.S. Video at the Associated Press. Thank you for joining us for our virtual headliner today with Joe Manchin, the Senior Senator from West Virginia, who chairs the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and the President of the United Mine Workers of America, Cecil Roberts, Jr. Our topic today is energy transition and the next steps for coal country. For those of you watching today, we are happy to accept your questions and will ask as many as time permits. To submit a question, please email headliners@press.org and put energy in the subject line. This is a pivotal moment in the energy sector and for coal producing states. U.S. coal consumption, which peaked in 2007, has been on the decline ever since. There are 44,000 coal miners at work in the United States today, down from 92,000 coal miners a decade ago. For states built around a coal mining economy, such as Senator Joe Manchin's West Virginia, this decline means a loss of not only mining and mine-related jobs and transportation and equipment, but also tax revenue. As Americans transition to cleaner sources of fuel, such as natural gas, wind, and solar, the coal industry can expect an ever-shrinking portion of the energy market. The Biden administration has promised that the transition away from coal and other fossil fuels will lead to new jobs in renewable energy. For the people of coal country, how the U.S. manages this transition is an existential question. Here to help us understand consequences of the clean energy transition on the coal industry and coal producing states, we are happy to welcome Senator Joe Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia who has previously served as the state's governor and Secretary of State. This year, he became chair of the Senate's Energy Committee. We will also hear from United Mine Workers of America President Cecil Roberts. Like the senator, President Roberts was born and raised in West Virginia. A sixth-generation coal miner, he has led the UMWA since 1997. He also serves on the Executive Council of the AFL-CIO. Welcome, Senator Manchin and Mr. Roberts. Let me now turn the screen over to Senator Manchin for some remarks.
Well, Lisa, thank you very much, and the National Press Club for allowing us to be here today, and my good friend Cecil Roberts for inviting me to be here also with you all today. America's coal miners are the backbone of our great nation. For generations, our miners have mined the coal. They really forged the steel that built the tanks and ships and the industries that we know that ensures our country is the strongest in the world. They've sacrificed their health to produce the energy our nation relied on and still relies on to this day. Too many coal mining families have mourned the loss of a loved one, including myself, my Uncle John, who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our nation. As chairman of the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee, ensuring our coal miners aren't left behind as America's transitions to a cleaner energy future is one of my top priorities. While the industry has been in a steady downturn in job opportunities, maintaining those good paying jobs as we reduce emissions is both possible and it's our responsibility. We can do that by funding the carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration research, development, and demonstration we authorized just last year in the Energy Act of 2020, and building out the energy infrastructure that commercial scale CCUS will need. We must also create incentives to bring back industries to America that will boost demand within the United States, providing new economic opportunities in our communities and good paying jobs for our qualified, experienced miners who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own. I recently introduced the American Jobs and Energy Manufacturing Act, which would provide $8 billion to incentivize domestic manufacturing of advanced energy technologies with targeted investment in rural communities across America that have had coal mines or coal power plants which closed. And we must invest in extraction and processing of critical minerals and the reclamation of abandoned mine land sites, both of which would employ the skills of our American miners. I also recognize the important role the AML fund plays in helping to shore up the UMWA health and retirement funds. And one of my top priorities this year is to ensure the collection of AML reclamation fees is extended before that authority expires in September of this year. I'm pleased to announce that I am co-sponsoring the PRO Act. 50% of unions fell in their first year of organizing. This legislation will level the playing field. I look forward to working with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to move this bill through a legislative process. And as we look toward the future of energy in the United States, we must work together to help our fellow Americans and West Virginians hit hardest by the industry downturn. So I look forward to working with UMWA and my dear friend, President Cecil Roberts, as we work towards our common goals that support not only our hardworking miners, but our economy, national security, and energy independence. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to be here today, and God bless each and every one of you.
Mr. Roberts.
Well, thank you to the Press Club and to you, Lisa, for this invitation. The last time I had the opportunity to do this, I commented, I think this is probably the first time, that was the first time that you ever had anyone that was born 15 miles up a holler speak at the Press Club, and now history's being made for a second time. And I'm very thrilled to be here, and I'm very appreciative of this opportunity. Let me just say how wonderful it is here to be with my good friend Joe Manchin. And if I heard him correctly, I think we just made some history here with respect to the PRO Act, and I want to thank him for that, because that's part of what we're suggesting here today as to what needs to happen in Appalachia. As far as managing these difficult times, I have to say that the government has not done a good job, if at all, managing what's going on in the coal fields. I want to thank Senator Manchin for his support in making sure pensions and health care for 80,000 retirees were protected. That touched 80,000 homes, but about 150,000 people in Appalachia. In addition to that, it allowed for coalfield clinics to remain open, hospitals and doctors to stay in the coal fields, which is an extremely important part of making sure people in Appalachia have health care and pensions and are able to support their families. We have about 4 points we'd like to make here, 3 or 4 points, I would say. The first is we're very much, as Senator Manchin is, interested in protecting existing coalfield jobs. I would say to our friends in government in high places that we've just about had all we can take of layoffs and people losing their jobs in the coal fields. And it doesn't have to be that way. Senator Manchin is a huge supporter of carbon capture and sequestration. But let me tell you who else is. The United Nations. Our friends in the environmental community are frequently citing the United Nations when they talk about carbon capture and sequestration being something that they don't like, but that's something that the entire world supports. We can maintain the jobs that we have. And there's a second piece of this that's so important. We can create jobs here in coal mining with carbon capture and sequestration. We can do one thing in this nation to put coal miners back to work in a very quick manner, and that would be to start making steel in this country again. We've lost so many jobs in mining, metallurgical coal in this nation over the last 20, 30 years. It's almost unbelievable that has happened to us. Let's have a policy in this country. If we're going to have infrastructure, let's make the steel in the United States. Let's mine metallurgical coal. Let's have those steel mills in this country. Let's create thousands of jobs. The second piece of this is that we have to think about the people who have already lost their jobs. I'm for any jobs that we can create, and I'm sure the senator is too, that would be good paying jobs for our brothers and sisters that have lost them in the UMWA, and there's been thousands of them. We lost 7,000 jobs last year alone. We're down to about 34,000 active coal miners in the United States of America. We need more jobs, but those jobs need to be good paying jobs. That's why it's so important for this country to pass the PRO Act, allowing people who want to join a union to have that opportunity. That's one of the basic freedoms that we have. The third piece of this that we would like to suggest is these coalfield communities across Appalachia, West Virginia, Southwestern Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, all these places we're familiar with, they've lost so much. I was looking at statistics over the last few days. it is so sad, the number of children who are no longer enrolled in school in West Virginia and other places in the coal fields. That's because their parents have packed up and went somewhere else. We need to support our teachers in the coal fields. We need the best education we can have, but we can't have it when our tax base just continues to be eroded here. So as we move forward from this place, we're for supporting the existing jobs that we have, creating new jobs. We're for carbon capture and sequestration. We're for good health care and good pensions in these Appalachian areas. And we're for jobs, and we can have good paying jobs. And just to make a point here, right now, 2/3 of all wind turbines are made in China. 2/3 of all the materials that go into solar power made in China. China is investing heavily in carbon capture and sequestration. Someone's going to develop this technology, and it ought to be the United States of America. We should not be at the mercy of China for solar panels, at the mercy of China for all technology related to energy. And by the way, they're still using about 4 billion tons of coal in China as we continue to shrink the amount of coal we utilize in the United States. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Well, I'm immediately going to say to Senator Manchin, what do you say to that? With all of that going over to China, with China making the point that President Roberts just made about the carbon capture sequestration and China possibly becoming the lead in that.
Well, at least it's ridiculous that we've allowed this to happen over the last 20 to 30 years. And not, it's just been the jobs eroding. West Virginia lost when you go back to the NAFTA, the old NAFTA. We started seeing migration immediately after that, and it's continued ever since. So with that being said, we have to look at the laws and how we do it and tax codes and how we enforce them. But carbon capture sequestration, Cecil is exactly correct on that. People, I said this, I'm for innovation, not elimination. We have many of our lawmakers in Washington, and we have many people who believe just quit using fossil. That's all. That'll take care of the problem. It's called global climate. It's not called North American climate. It's not called West Virginia climate. It's global climate. And there's more fossil being used in the world today than ever before. And it's not receding. They're going to use whatever fuels they have in their backyard. With that, we have to entice them to use the new technology, which we should be developing and manufacturing in America, preferably in West Virginia. We can do all of this. That's who we are. But the bottom line, talk to Dr. Brio, the head of the International Energy Agency, IEA. He'll tell you, if you want to clean up the climate, if you want to help Mother Earth, then you better advance carbon capture, sequestration, and utilization. And we know that we can do it commercially. We just haven't found how we have a downstream or a value for the carbon that we're extracting.
President Roberts?
Well, I think that's absolutely right. The United Nations has made it very clear that we'll never deal with climate change to the degree that we need to deal with it without carbon capture and sequestration. One of the things that's very frustrating, I think, as we look around both the United States and the world itself, there are places that are very remote in the world, as we know, and they're not as advanced as we are. They are not going to take a back seat here with what they job creating and with people making decent wages and benefits in their country. They'll burn coal, and we have to figure out a way to make coal acceptable in this environment we find ourselves in. And there's only one way to do that, and that's carbon capture and sequestration. One of the things that I find somewhat frustrating from our friends on the left with respect to environmental movement, they seem to be opposed to carbon capture and sequestration, which I find to be that's not somewhat confusing, it's very confusing, particularly when the United Nations itself says this is exactly what we should be doing.
So for folks who are listening who aren't deep in the weeds in Washington, can you kind of make it basic for us? Does this mean that your organization accepts the fact that there is climate change, number one? And is it basically, are you also saying that it's basically put up or shut up time have you just heard too many promises from the federal government at this stage in the game?
And we're very religious in Appalachian. We don't make any apologies for that. But we believe that the second coming of the Lord is going to get here before a just transition makes it our way. So it's time for the people who are in power to say, this is how we're going to do this. Right now, there's a lot of conversation ongoing, and I know Senator Manchin knows this much better than me. I try to follow this. And when people say we're going to have good paying union jobs at the end of the day, and the jobs that we're talking about, so we're clear right at this moment, don't pay but a fraction of what a coal miner makes with respect to how much money they bring into their families every single year, and whether or not they have health care, and whether or not they have pensions. And some of these jobs are actually contractor jobs, which would make it almost impossible to organize. For me, one of the first steps here is, how are you going to make these jobs good paying when you ask a coal miner who's making $100,000 a year to give up that job, give up his health care, which is the best in the world, give up a pension that he has earned, and some people are still earning credit towards lifetime health care thanks to the legislation that was passed at the end of 2019. How do you ask people to do that without some clarity here? And I think all of us in Appalachia, we want to do our part. But set that to the side for a moment. Anybody in Appalachia that would say, well, I don't want good paying jobs in Appalachia because they might come from the Biden administration, I find that to be utterly ridiculous. We'll take the good paying jobs any way we can get them. We need to bring manufacturing to West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky and Southwestern Virginia, jobs that are currently being done by somebody else in the world at low pay. That's why it's happening, because somebody in the world will pay somebody else less. Are we really about the business of chasing after the cheapest job we can find in this country? We can do better than that. Let's bring those jobs to Appalachia and let's pay a decent wage where people can support their families. We desperately need those jobs.
So,
Lisa,
yes.
can I
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
Add on to that? You know, everything's talked about EV, electrical vehicles, and the
Right.
batteries and all that. Do you know that we don't produce any of the rare earth minerals, or very, very, very little of any rare earth minerals that it takes to make a battery? You know, we depend on other sources in the world, and basically the people are being enslaved in parts of the world in order to get the resources that we seem to want to be out of sight, out of mind. And we just say, well, we have an electric vehicle. It's just a shame that we're going down this path, but we made no provisions at all to manufacture and basically have the resources it takes to manufacture that battery. And also as far as recycling that battery, things of this sort that we're not even thinking into. The other thing, as far as on the what we call baseload fuels, there's only 2 fuels right now that you can count on that basically provides the energy that you use every day. That's going to be nuclear and coal. That runs 24/7, doesn't matter whether it's raining or shining, doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Now, natural gas has replaced coal, but it still basically can be an interrupted source. You can have pipelines burst, pipelines freeze up, pump houses freeze up. But usually if the coal is right there beside the power plant, it'll burn. We have made so much stride, and people don't give credit for this. You know, back in the day when I was growing up, my mom had a hard time hanging her laundry out because of the coal-fired plants that we had around us and the coal camps we lived in. But that's all been changed with scrubbers, low NOx boilers, bag houses for mercury. So it's not the particulates. We've been able to remove the particulates from the coal mining process and definitely from the coal-fired plants. What we haven't been able to is CO2 because it's almost cost prohibitive. We just haven't put the amount of effort and technology because people want to go a different direction, and you've got to have a certain amount of baseload fuel to do it.
We're getting a lot of questions in from folks, members and non-members of the National Press Club. So let me get to some of those because I really want to make sure that we get those in for some of these reporters. First question comes from Brad McElney of the West Virginia Metro News. And I think this can go to President Roberts or to Senator Manchin. First question, were you aware of the coal community comeback plan that West Virginia's legislature included in and then amended out of legislation. And that comeback plan would have directed the Public Service Commission to study the water and wastewater, broadband, and other infrastructure needs necessary to revitalize communities. And the study would have also searched for opportunities to maintain and increase jobs in coal mines, coal-fired power plants, and other economic drivers in those communities. So does that not matter, that plan, the coal community comeback plan?
Well, the key here is that if you recall, I mentioned that part of our idea here is with respect to how to deal with transition or moving forward or trying to deal with the pain that's already been inflicted in these communities, is that we need to lift up these communities and provide jobs in those communities, which would be the most important thing that we could do at this point in time. That's why we support the bringing of jobs into West Virginia, Appalachia, Eastern Kentucky, Southwestern Virginia, anywhere that we can find a job or a manufacturing base for these areas. We need to do it because the tax base has been eroded. I was, statistics drive me crazy because they can tell you about anything that you want. But statistically, the funding for essential services in Appalachia has dropped dramatically. In places like Boone County, West Virginia, the community revitalization is an important piece of what we're talking about doing here. How that mixes with what the legislature proposed to do is I'm a little bit unclear, but what we're talking about is bringing real money and real jobs and a real future for folks in Appalachia. Let me do one quick follow-up on what Senator Manchin said. People think that carbon capture is only for coal. Remember, the proposal that's on the table through the administration is that there will be no fossil fuels utilized for the generation of electricity in this country, which means natural gas will not be utilized either. One thing that has happened in Appalachia is we've lost coal jobs. So many coal miners have found work and installing pipelines throughout West Virginia and other locations. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people have union doing that work in also on top of ending coal mining jobs. So we shouldn't lose sight that we're talking about eliminating all fossil fuels. So we're also talking about losing a lot of jobs in that area. If we have carbon capture and sequestration, we can still tap into our natural resources of natural gas in West Virginia.
So since you're talking about that, another question from Corbin Heyer at Politico. He says, both you and the senator are expressing support for carbon CCUS. Carbon pricing would make that more commercially viable. So do you guys also support a carbon tax or other mechanism to put a price on emissions of greenhouse gases?
I'll let the senator go first, but I have a strong position on that.
Well, first of all, when putting a tax and really a tax on some pass to the consumers will not fix the problem. If it's going to be a financial scheme, which is what the cap and trade was, it was basically robbing Peter to pay Paul and then paying somebody else that wasn't even affected. How they had that based up before, the way when I opposed it, Elisa, it was based before on anybody. I mean, if you were in a solar business or if you were in the wind business, you could be trading carbon credits. Why? You don't produce any carbon, CO2. So why would you be able to trade? So the bottom line, unless there's going to be a way to fix and find the new technologies, they want a way to eliminate and transition it and get it out of business. Let me just real quick, I've got some figures for you that might help your viewers. If you want to know what's going on in the world, there's 667 coal-fired plants being constructed as we speak today around the world. 0 in the US, 667 in the world. There's currently operating 5,286 power plants in the world. 504 are in the US. The other 4,700 are around the world and no intentions of closing down. So people need to know what's going on. So if you think that you can stick your head in the sand and say, I'm going to eliminate all fossil, all coal-fired plants, shut them down, it'll clean up the environment, you better start looking around what's happening in the world.
So that takes me to my next question from Washington Post reporter Tony Rome. So, Senator Manchin, are you going to demand that new aid for the coal industry or its workers be included as part of any infrastructure deal in order to win your vote? And I know that lots of folks have been wondering about where you stand on that, and what would you like to see included if that's—
Well, the infrastructure bill, basically, we need to look at infrastructure itself, okay? And basically what is needed. And that's what we're looking at right now. The bill that we have now is a pretty expanding, what we call an omnibus bill.
Right.
And we're trying to get it in different quadrants that we can do it. But I can tell you the human infrastructure, such as you can't leave anybody behind. And we have been left behind. People asked me one time, they said, what happened to West Virginia? How come West Virginia's changed from a Democrat state to a Republican state? How did that happen in the quickest amount of time that we've ever seen? I said, I can tell you how West Virginia feels. We feel like the returning Vietnam veteran. We've done every dirty job you've asked us to do. We never questioned. We did it and performed well. And now all of a sudden, we're not good enough. We're not clean enough. We're not green enough. We're not smart enough. You want to know why they quit voting for Democrats? That's the reason. And I've been as direct as I can be. Now, with that, you cannot leave this community of ours in West Virginia or any producing community. You cannot just give up on manufacturing, and you can't give up on fossil that can be done in a much cleaner way that provides the energy that this is needed, that's going to be used all over the world, and we need it in America.
It looks like we've lost President Roberts, and I had a question to follow on.
He'll come back. He might have gotten—
I'm sure he will. I'm sure he will. So then let me ask you this, because when we're talking about President Biden's infrastructure package includes tying labor standards to tax credits for renewable energy, directing that money to union-run apprenticeships, targeting economic development grants to former mining towns. So do you see the ideas that are outlined in the PRO Act and in other ways? Are those part of the infrastructure bill, or is that something in addition to what has already been proposed?
Is that for me or
well, it's kind of for both of you, but if you can begin.
I can begin basically on that. We're looking at it as a separate piece of legislation because we need to make sure that we can save these coal communities and basically these manufacturing areas. You know, we did that with the auto industry back when the collapse in 27, 28. And also now we're doing that, and we have a 48C tax credit. So we're trying to do it with, so the coal communities can have the same opportunities. These people can make anything that you want. They are so innovative and creative and resourceful. Just give them a chance. They'll build you the best darn windmill you've ever seen, the best solar panel. But all they're doing now, as Cecil had said before, someone else is building all the components, manufacturing the components, saying all we're doing is assembling them. So that doesn't get the job done. It really doesn't. So we're looking at every way we can to bring opportunities where these people can use their skill sets.
President Roberts, welcome back.
Well, thank you.
As we live in a Zoom world, it's all good. A question for you regarding the future of coal mine workers. If you don't address the need for some sort of energy transition, which I think that's what you're doing in your proposal here, what do you think about the insistence on keeping the corporate tax rate lower than what President Biden has proposed in order to pay for the infrastructure package?
Let me, if I could just comment briefly on the carbon tax. I didn't get to
oh no, go right ahead.
Address that. We think that the carbon tax is a way to avoid carbon capture and sequestration altogether, because what the carbon tax would do is place a heavy penalty on fossil fuels, which would make coal and perhaps even natural gas completely uncompetitive. So we would never get to the advancement of the technology that's needed worldwide for carbon capture and sequestration to allow the utilization of these fuels around the world and help deal with this climate situation that we're talking about trying to deal with. With respect to, I'm not real clear on what the point of the question is. If you keep the corporate tax lower, somehow that helps keep people working. Is that the point that's being made by the question?
Well, they're asking what is the future for miners if you don't address the need for some sort of energy transition in
Well,
general?
that part is easy because there is no future. As I mentioned previously, there's been over 60 bankruptcies in the coal fields, if you can imagine that. People lost their pensions, lost their health care, lost their jobs, lost their wages, lost their ability to provide for their families. That's the way we deal currently with transition. We need something much better than that. We need to protect the jobs we have to the extent we can. We have to look at the fact that 7,000 people lost their jobs just last year in this industry. And where did they go? They went to the unemployment line. Some of the things that Congress has done to help those who lost their jobs have been very beneficial, obviously. But we have a future here that we have to look at. What are we going to do with the 7,000 people who lost their jobs last year? How about the 40,000 people plus that's lost their jobs in this industry just in about 10 years? I think we need to provide a future for those people, a future for anybody that loses their job because of a transition in this country, regardless if it's coal, oil, gas, or any other industry for that matter. We talk about just transition all the time. I wish people quit using that. There's never been a just transition in the history of the United States, and that's sad. The transition you get is down at the courthouse and whatever you can get out of bankruptcy, and it's generally nothing.
Okay.
Hey, Lisa, let me just say, can I just add to that real quick?
Let me just clarify the second half of that question, because this has to do with you, Senator Manchin. So the second half of that question is, what do you think of Senator Manchin's insistence on keeping the corporate tax rate lower than what President Biden has proposed in order to pay for the infrastructure package?
So there's two, you're asking me that. So there's two,
yes, sir.
There's two points of view of that. One is, by keeping the corporate tax lower, does that create jobs and maintain jobs, or can you raise it without adversely affecting jobs and employment? Senator Manchin believes that you need to keep it lower to keep jobs in play. I have no problem with the slight increase that's been proposed. I think we need money to create jobs also, but that's a debate that we can have. But that's the 2 points of view, and I guess with respect to that, I differ slightly from my good friend Senator Manchin.
Lisa, if I can say, I've been pretty clear at 25%. That's something that we worked on before in the 2017. I did not support the 2017 tax cuts by President Trump at that time because they went way too far that I thought would keep us competitive, but yet also put us in the hole of over $1.5 trillion, which it did. So with that, I said 25% is where I was. The other thing is we've eviscerated the IRS. When's the last time anyone's heard of a good audit going on or someone's under audit? We have very few people on the field. Computer systems needs upgraded. We have reported anywhere from $400 to $500 billion a year not even being collected. So there's so much that we can do. The other thing I want to go back to manufacturing. Anything I've said about manufacturing, why we have lost or why we haven't been able to replace, and what Cecil just said, a just transition. If you want to transition, then make sure whatever you're transitioning to, they usually give tax credits. And I'll give you a perfect example. Wind and solar got tremendous amount of tax credits over the years. Those tax credits should have been made to be used in the states that lost the traditional energy jobs it provided or were being replaced. And that was never done. That's the injustice that we talk about, and that's what has to be corrected.
When you talked about the jobs lost, President Roberts, talk a little bit about how COVID impacted the workers there last year and even this year. And I'm very curious how coal miners are working with COVID being in the system.
Well, a couple of things. I think the federal government failed here also. We asked that MSHA, which is the agency that protects miners underground as well as on the surface, promulgate a rule that would protect them. And so all coal miners in this country would be doing the same thing. I have to give great praise, if I might, to our membership, particularly our local union members who had this handed to them. So you have to figure out how to make your place where you work and your fellow miners and your members work and protect them. And I have to say this, most companies try to work with our local union officers, but it was absolutely no help from up here. It was all down here and people trying to figure out how to deal with COVID. Can you imagine a coal miner being told, oh, this is what this means. This is killing people. We're not supposed to be in close proximity of one another, and that's impossible in a coal mine. You got to get on. You got to change clothes in a bathhouse. You got to get on an elevator and ride. Sometimes as far as in Alabama, 2,000 feet straight down to get in a man trip and ride back on the section. You're on a long wall, and most people don't know what that is. And you're passing each other all day long, and the government says we're not getting involved in that. You guys figure it out. And quite frankly, the safety committees, the local union officers, and the people running the mines had to do that. But the thing on the economic front, when you say 7,000 jobs is a lot of jobs in the industry that's been shrinking, I think a lot of those jobs, by the way, will come back. But we lost those jobs because of the marketplace. If you want to just think about this, when the economy shrinks worldwide, everybody suffers, and coal miners lost their jobs because the marketplace shrunk worldwide. We had the worst pandemic we've ever had, worst health crisis since 1918, and I would argue the worst economic crisis since 1929, all in the same year. And that's why so many people, particularly in the coal industry, lost their jobs. But we weren't hit as hard. Think about my brothers and sisters in HERE, it's the hotel workers and restaurant workers. They lost everybody. They lost about 300,000 people, and they've had to figure out how to survive this past year. My hat's off to every worker in this country who risked their life, quite frankly, to go to work.
So Senator Manchin, what about that, what President Roberts says about the federal government's lack of response on COVID for coal mine workers? And you're muted. You're going to want to take yourself off mute.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you're good to go.
I'm glad you have that technical capacity on your end, so I forget sometime. Anyway, no, on that, there wasn't much attention to that whatsoever, because basically they thought, well, the coal, I don't know why they thought we were still mining when there was a lack of demand everywhere. All the products were down. Manufacturing was down. Basically, demand from all the restaurants and everything else from energy was down. So naturally, we would be down too. The only help that we were able to give, basically with the COVID packages, is unemployment extension benefits of that sort, and everything else that we were able to do during that period of time. But the most important thing now is to get people back to work. The economy is taking off again. We don't want to be left behind. So we have got to have people back to the workforce and making sure that the jobs that we have will continue, that there's a demand around the world. We do an awful lot of exporting. And if it hadn't been for the export markets, then West Virginia would have been hurting worse than what we're already hurting.
I have to go back, though, and ask you, President Roberts mentioned that the federal government didn't help in terms of working with the coal mine workers on how you work in a pandemic, and their job literally requires them to be like so close to each other. So what is being done, or have we not thought about how we want to help folks in that industry from help from the federal government with COVID, because it's not going away, right?
Well, let me just tell you, in the coal industry, all of us who come from coal country and coal industry, we haven't been at the top of the food chain when the thought process is about working people. Okay, I'll say that in a nutshell. By many administrations, past them, they might all talk a good game in the past administrations, but they haven't done anything as far as coming there concerned about what's going on and how we are operating. I'm not sure how many have ever been in a coal mine. I don't know if they even know how we operate in a coal mine. When President Roberts is talking about long walls or conventional mining and how the operation down underneath and how they do this and the type of work they do, the appreciation for the coal miner, I said this, everyone should get on their knees every night and say a prayer for a coal miner that gave you the country you've got, because without them, you wouldn't have it. And we've taken that for granted. So when it comes to, okay, separation, how do we keep you safe, this and that? Well, the respirators, many of them wear respirators, so that's been a help to a certain extent underneath them, but there's a lot of times that they haven't. I'm sure that has been, I have not heard back. President Roberts might know about that if that's been mandatory now in the coal mines when they're working down with the respirators, or what you're seeing is a face mask. They have much more of an intricate apparatus they can use that protects them better. I don't know if that's been mandatory or not right now. I know they have been checked. I know they have been screened and tested. That's been of high priority for all the workforce, because people couldn't bring someone in that might be affected and put them in a very close working condition where it might affect their entire workforce. But we've had no mines, President Roberts, you might have heard, have we had any mines that closed down because of COVID infection? They had to close the mine down?
And to answer that, there's not been a mine that closed because of COVID infections, but we've had a number of people who contracted COVID. We've had, I think, 2 people die from COVID who were active across this country, which is pretty remarkable when you think about the statistics that exist out there. One of the things that happened is the coal companies, once we realized the federal government wasn't going to issue or promulgate a rule here, worked with the safety committees and tried to protect people the best that they could. And I think they did a remarkable job. If I could just point something out, what a difficult year last year was for some of our people. We were going through a bankruptcy at Murray Energy. And it's the largest producer of coal that's under contract with the UMWA. That 2,000 people here. And we went through the bankruptcy and resolved that. At the same time, we're trying to deal with a pandemic. And my hat goes off to those miners. I swear they've been through so much. Right now, we're on strike in Alabama because of a bankruptcy and what it did to the workforce and the terms and conditions of employment in 2016. In these bankruptcies, people don't realize this. We lose the right to represent people in these bankruptcies. People lose their right to employment in these bankruptcies. They lose their pensions or lose their health care. And there's been 60 some of these. And people look at that and just bat their eyes and go on. But this is not the beginning of this issue for us. We've been through this now for 10 years of trying to deal with what happens when a mine closes down. Can we get the people back to work? What kind of terms and conditions of employment are they going back under? Coal miners have been through a horrendous period of time here.
Since you're talking more along the lines of local coal miners, a question from Steve Hooks at IHS Market. Cecil, could you characterize the negotiations between the UMWA local and Warrior Met? Have you made any progress on that? And are there any indications on whether stockpiles are still moving from the mines to port?
Well, just so everybody understands, there's 2 types of coal in this country. There's actually more than 2, but 2 primary types of coal. One is used for the generation of electricity, which we've had a long conversation about here over the past few minutes. The other type it will be utilized to make steel. Unfortunately, in this country, we ship that coal we mine here around the world to get it to where we make steel, or where the world makes steel. I remember when we used to make steel here in the United States, U.S. Steel, Bethlehem, and National Mining, on and on and on. Those companies don't exist because somebody was doing this cheaper and producing the same product cheaper, and a lot of instances because of low wages. But with respect to Warrior Met never existed until 5 years ago. Jim Walter Resources ran these mines. We never had a problem in Alabama with them. When this company took over, as you might guess, investors from Wall Street came down, bought the company out of bankruptcy. The bankruptcy judge says, union, you don't represent these workers any longer. Workers, you don't have a job here unless this company decides to hire you. You don't have pensions, don't have health care. 2,500 retirees lost their retirement benefits of health care, just like that. And the union picked that up until we were able to pass legislation, took care of that. As far as progress, we've been on strike since April the 1st, and I would say there's not been any progress made to another contract since we started striking on April 1st.
Senator Manchin, you and Senator Capito got the Congress to pass bills for retiree health benefits and pension support for minors in recent years when other industries got nothing similar. So, and you did this when it was hard to move anything through the Senate. Are the minors a special case in this instance, or are your colleagues on the Hill more open to support uh, for minors than most other workers? And if so,
No, I think that that was a very it was a kind of a very personal, moving type of a thing that happened during that period of time. I worked on that for about 3 or 4 years, and Cecil and every miner from my home area and all around the country came here and every day and for weeks on end, years on end, they never gave up. We put hardworking faces, and the human element was here in the Capitol, and people could see them and talk to them, what they get. When it came down to it, every Democrat supported 100% the caucus. Who doesn't support fossil, who doesn't support coal, a lot of times, in some of the legislation, but they supported the humans that made the country what we are today. They never backed up, and I was very proud of that, and I was very happy to be a part of that. But we just kept making sure people understood. Then, at the time, we got senators on the Republican side at the time, and on the Finance Committee. They came out of Finance Committee in a bipartisan way of support. And I said, if you leave the working men and women who built this country, provided the energy that won every war, that built the industrial might in the middle class as we know it, then you've given up on America. If you give up on these people, it wasn't their fault that someone basically bankrupted their company and took basically the money that was supposed to have gone in to a retirement plan or a pension plan, or basically their post-ops of what they should have received when they retired. And the bankruptcy laws, I'm working on now to change the bankruptcy laws, because if we don't change the bankruptcy laws, and if we can't put the human element at the front of the line versus the back of the line when there's nothing left over, once the courts divvy up what assets are left, then we'll never fix this problem. And I will say this, the central states, we took care of thousands and thousands of people through the last piece of legislation that we just did. And that's going to be a tremendous help to many, many people across America. So finally, we have put our money where our mouth is and took care of the working people and fulfilled the obligation and responsibility that we have, or the company should have had and didn't fulfill.
so I would be remiss if I don't ask this question from my colleague at the Associated Press, Alan Fram. Why isn't achieving Democratic priorities on issues like immigration and voting rights more important than retaining a procedure like the filibuster that's not in the Constitution and that Democrats say Republicans have been abusing for years?
Well, I remember the last 2 or 3 years when President Trump put an enormous amount of pressure on getting rid of the filibuster. I remember this has been since 2013. There's no one talking. They're not working together. They're not sitting down trying to work out the differences. And they think the easiest way just to get rid of something. The Senate was designed to be bipartisan. The Senate is the only body in the world designed the way we are. And if you really want to know, and all of your listeners want to know the quick short of it, why does every state, no matter how large or what the population, have 2 representatives in the Senate? No matter whether you're Rhode Island or California, because there's a reason and purpose for that, which I think our founding fathers decided would be something extraordinarily different. So we have got to, I'm not giving up on the Senate, I'm not giving up on democracy, and I'm not giving up on bipartisanship. You can't do that. If you can't sit down and come to an agreement, how do we get everyone to support our miners when they don't even support? I couldn't get 10 votes in my caucus on supporting using coal when it's still something they need. But when it came to the human element, we found a way forward to get everybody on both sides. And they came forward on that. So I still believe very strongly. And on these other things, the other things you're talking on the voting rights, there's guardrails if we can work out something there. But the 10th Amendment, I was a former governor, I've been a former Secretary of State. Everyone should have an open access and process in elections and have it secured. That's the responsibility, state by state. And if they're not doing it, we can put guardrails on, but basically it's still the state's responsibility that we have to make sure that they fulfill.
Okay. Well, before I get to my final question, there's still so much. I mean, an hour goes by just entirely too quickly for us. Before we wrap today's discussion, let me just take a moment to thank Headliners co-team leaders Donna Linewan-Leger and Lori Russo, the Headliners team member who organized today's event, Jamie Horwitz, our club communications director, Lindsay Underwood, and club executive director, Bill McCarron. I understand that the UMWA has a document that they will be releasing. Copies of it should be available now on their website, and you can find that at www.umwa.org. I'd also like to tell you about some upcoming National Press Club headliners. On April 28th, we host Democratic National Committee Chair Jamie Harrison. And on April 29th, we have a very special event with the Mothers of NPR. I'm very excited about this one. I worked at an NPR affiliate as one of my first jobs out of college. Susan Stamberg, Nina Totenberg, and Linda Wertheimer, along with author Lisa Napoli, will join us. Her new book explores their extraordinary story. And more events happening at the National Press Club are listed at www.press.org. We hope you'll join us. So, questions for both of you from our listening audience. And I don't know if maybe folks didn't hear this quite straight, but they want to hear it again, even if you already answered it. So this one from Dino Grandoni at the Washington Post. Question for both Senator Manchin and President Roberts. Bottom line, do you support a version of a clean energy standard as proposed in President Biden's infrastructure package? And what would you want in exchange for support of a standard? Cecil Roberts.
Thank you. If I could just follow up on a point Joe made a minute ago, if you don't mind. I think the reason that Congress acted to support coal miners' pensions and healthcare, by the way, they did the same thing for everybody in the most recent package that passed Congress, protecting pensions for all workers. But the question that was asked about why did Congress act, there's been over 100,000, probably about 120,000 coal miners die mining coal and energizing this nation in the coal mines itself. There's been at least 170,000 coal miners die from pneumoconiosis energizing this nation. Coal miners are the most patriotic people on earth. Almost every single person that I know that was a mentor to me when I was growing up served in the military, particularly during World War II, as my father did. And I'm a Vietnam veteran and proud of that. So we've given a lot out of Appalachia. West Virginia lost more soldiers per capita in Vietnam than any state in the Union. So we don't come here with our hat in our hand. We've given this country a lot. So with respect to an energy standard, I would make a judgment on this energy standard based on what that does with respect to coalfield employment for active coal miners. What does that standard do with the hope and the prayer that other coal miners will have an opportunity to have a job? And I'm not looking to trade anything here. I'm looking to do the best I can for coal miners who certainly deserve some consideration here in this conversation.
I think that trade was aimed at Senator Manchin. So, Senator, you have the floor. Do you support a version of a clean energy?
Let me just say this. If this energy plan does not recognize that fossil, such as coal, is going to be needed and used, if we give up on it in America, then you might as well give up on climate. As far as climate change will happen, it won't be good, because that means you're saying that, well, out of sight, out of mind. We're not doing it in the U.S. We got rid of coal completely. And I just told you what's happening in the rest of the world. You better come to realization. This is the only country that will find a solution through innovation that produces new technology. The rest of them don't have the desire to do it. We do. And then we can use our trading policies and the open market process that we have, and a caveat that use this new technology, and you have different caveats to our market. There's a way to do it with sovereign countries. But we're sitting back and saying, we'll just get rid of it. Like we're going to go to EVs. We don't care if there's families enslaved in Angola. We don't care that China's supplying all the resources. We don't care about that. No. We just want to see windmills and we want to see EV cars and this and that. We forget of the suffering around the world. And responsible resourcing should be put into every manufacturer's plan. They haven't done that. We can use coal and continue to use it cleaner than ever before. And we can clean up the environment around the world, but we can't do it by sticking our head in the sands and eliminating.
Well, you know, in so many ways, you're the linchpin in so many things that happen in the Senate today.
If what I'm saying doesn't make sense, then show it to me. That's all I've said, Lisa. Show it to me. When there's 667 new coal-fired plants, that doesn't mean they're regressing. That doesn't mean they're changing. When there's 5,200 providing, okay, that doesn't mean they've changed. 5,200 coal-fired plants. And I guarantee you, most of those coal plants do not have the technology we have right now in America. And we can do so much more. We can eliminate the CO2. We can eliminate the greenhouse gases almost if they work with us, but you can't be fighting it every minute of every political day, fighting against something that's a reality. You've got to fix it.
Okay. Cecil Roberts, Senator Manchin, thank you so very much for your time today at the National Press Club, albeit virtually. Happy to have you in person next time. Senator Manchin, you know, we've got more questions for you on a ton of other topics. So you're going to have to come back. You're going to have to come back.
I'm happy to do it anytime.
And President Roberts, thank you very, very much. And when you come back to the press club, bring some of those coal mine workers with you.
We will do
Bring
that.
some
Thank you very much.
pepperoni rolls too, Cecil, okay?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.